Good day to you, Sir Alojado. Today I will show you my output for Activity 4, which is a simple product management system. So this is gonna be the table of contents of the things that I will be showing you on this video. So right now I'm doing the introduction, then we will move on to our database, then the actual JFrame, how the connections are made, and then the buttons themselves, which will do the operations needed to comply for this activity. So now move on to our database. Now we are here in PHP My Admin. Now I will show you my database. So as for the requirements, the name of the database is my full name underscore DB. Then I only made one table named product underscore TTL. The table will have 8 total columns with one primary key, being the product ID. Then comes next the product name or prod name, the size, price, quantity, purchase date, expiration date, and the manufacturer. For the expiration date, I enabled the null value so that I am able to input no dates for the expiration date. This is only for preference, as I believe that not all products have an expiration date. But for the sake of I will show most of my records with an expiration date. So in total, I've already created, or inserted a bunch of datas to work with. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 total datas that will work around. And yes, that's it for our database tour. We will now move on to the actual Java program, where I will show you how things will connect MySQL to NetBeans and the functionality of my program. And now we are here in NetBeans 13 ID. So let's take a look around. So in total, we have a total of 3 Java files, JFrames to be specific, that we will be using for this activity. First, we have what I call the menu form. Only made this as a preference because I want to make it user friendly. I want to create a landing form for the users to interact with. After clicking the DB control panel button, we can move on to the product control panel, or the control panel form. Here, we will be able to do most of the functionality for this activity with additional features like the navigation buttons. Over here, we have a few buttons here. We have the add button that allows us to add a new record, the save button that will actually insert the data inputted in the text fields into the database. Then there's a cancel button that cancels the adding of the new record, therefore not adding any record. Then we have the navigation buttons. We have the first button. The first button will lead us to the very first data in our table. The last button does the opposite, which leads us to the very last entry in our database. The previous allows us to go back one row. The next leads to another row. So that's it for the control panel. Then if you click the search button, with or without any input in the text field, it will open the search result form. The search result form is a very specific form that allows us to see the result of what we've searched. This form itself has the functionality to search again, to update, delete, and clear, but it has no ability whatsoever to add a new record. So we have the quit button that will open the control panel form once again. And for extra functionality and info and information, we have a JTable here, or the product table. This will show the user what the whole database, all the records stored in the database, that will make searching easier. And now let's move on how we were able to connect the PHP database or MySQL database to our Java program here in NetBeans. First would be the very necessary step. We would need the MySQL connector in our library and in the service. And here we have a connection that allows us to connect our Java program to the PHP database, specifically the database that we are working on right now, my full name underscore DB. That's it for the initialization. And now let's move on to the actual Java code that lets us access the database and make queries as we should. So for the control panel form, this JFrame over here, I used a continuous connection over here. So I have here an instance variable, connection con, the result set rs, and the statement stmt now. So in our constructor, I have added the toConnect method, which is the method over here, a public method that will allow us to continuously connect to the database without any closure whatsoever. I will explain later why we did this, instead of creating a static method where we will create a new object or instance every time we try and do a query. For now, I will explain how the connection is made. So over here, we have stated the driver link, and we stored the connection URL in the string over here. This is the connection URL that we saw earlier here, the connection that we made. We also made a string to store the username and the password. Though there is no password, it is still important to include the password to avoid any discrepancies. The next up is the making the connection itself. Using the connection named con, we call the driver manager, and then we get the connection using the strings where we stored the connection URL, username, and password. With this, our program will be able to ask permission to the database to do queries. Next up, we created a bunch of a statement over here using con create statement, and with very specific parameters. So the purpose of this statement over here and this SQL code over here, select all from product table, and the rs is equals to statement execute query, which executes this SQL code. This allows us to input the very first data in the text fields the moment we open this form. For example, over here we called in rs next result set.next. Then we just get the proper values for each columns over here, and then we set those values into the text fields themselves. After that, we just put in a bunch of catch statements to catch any types of error that we might encounter. For example, an SQL exception error over here. This will catch any SQL related errors that may occur. It may be from incorrect syntax, connection problems, and more. And then we have the class not found error here. This block will catch any error that is related to a missing library. This is the connection for my control panel form. Now I will explain the connection, the way we connected the database here in the search result form. So for the search result form, I made static method, static setter method, a connection named my connection. So here we start out with initializing the connection. So we made an object here, we declared an object here, connection con, and then we just put in null in the beginning. Then we're gonna put all of our code in a try catch method in order to catch any type of errors that we might encounter in this procedure. Okay, in the try block, here we will see the link for our driver, the connection URL, username and password, and then the connection itself. So since this is a static method, whenever we want to make a connection to the database, for example, make a query for a specific button, we have to make an object that will call this very method. I will show this example later on. So that's it for the explanation on how we are connecting or accessing the database in our Java code. And now we are going to explain the navigation buttons that we have created. Though it is not necessary, I do believe that it serves a very important purpose of being able to move around the database in our program instead of just using the search function. It gives the user the convenience of going through the database in the way they want to, aka moving through the data one by one. So now let's explain how this works. So since we're in the control panel form, the connection here to the database is continuous. We don't need to create a new connection for each button. Therefore, the result set will always have information in it. And now that is a very important info into consideration, as for the navigation buttons, it requires us to have access to the entirety of the records. The result set is basically a pointer that points to the data that we are looking at. If you don't have a continuous connection to the database, the result set will always start at the beginning. Therefore, if we click the button first, previous, next, except last, therefore, if we try to do the previous and the next button, it will only lead back to the very first record. The only button that will work here is the first and the last button, as they all point to the first and end of the database. So now let us explain the inner workings of the navigation buttons. And a good place to start is, of course, first button. Double click that. Here in the first button, by default, we need our code to be inside a try catch method. This will allow us to catch any type of errors that might occur in our code. So for the first button first, we have the result set that first. This code allows us to access the very first data in our database. Basically, the result set that first will take the data from the very first entry in our then all we have to do is to retrieve that using the getString or getInt methods. We store them in their respective variables, and then we just set the text into the text field. Easy as that. Next, we move on to the last button. Like the first button, the last button calls upon the very end of the database. It retrieves the information, all the columns in that data at the very end of the database, and then all we have to do to get the data, store them in their respective variables, and then set the text in their respective text fields. Very easy. Now let's move on to the next button. The next button basically accessing the next row that you are currently looking at. The result set retrieves the information, stores the information of where it is currently pointing at. As I mentioned earlier, it is a pointer. It points to the rows of data in our database. Therefore, for the next button, it has to have complete access to all of the rows in the database in order to move around freely. For the result set that next, all it does is move one row after the row that it was looking at or pointing at. If we didn't have a continuous connection, the result set will always lead to the first record. Therefore, it will not work. So, same principle with the first and the last button. All we have to do is to retrieve the code to get the data, store them in a variable, and then set those variables in their respective text fields. For the previous button, it has the same principle. The only difference is that the previous method for the result set goes backwards instead of forwards from where it is currently pointing at. So that's it for the navigation button. But before we move on to the actual operational and functional buttons, let me demonstrate the navigational buttons to you. First, let us run our menu form. Click the button. We have the product control panel, and here we see this is the effect of the initialization that we made earlier in our do connect method for the control panel form. At the very beginning, we already have data in our text fields. So now let us demonstrate the navigation buttons. Of course, to see the effect, we will begin with the last button. By clicking the last button, we retrieve data from the very last record. Now let us select the first button. Now it is at the very beginning of our database, the very first record there. Now let's click the next button. As you can see, it's moving one by one because it is able to access the rows in the result set via the result set. If we didn't have a continuous connection, we won't be able to do this, as the result set will always reset back to the very first record. Do that, and once we reach the end, it will just message us, tell us that it is now the end of the file. Just click OK. Reviews. See? Same principle as the next button. And of course, that is, we are now at the very first record. Therefore, end of the file. Just click OK. That's the end for the navigation button. Now let's begin explaining the Crud operations in our Java program. Here we have the create or add button. This is connected with the save cancel button. Then we have the read or the search button, then the update button, then delete button. We have the clear button that simply clears the text field so that we are able to conveniently enter any data that we want. And lastly, we have the quit button, which simply exits this form. Now, first let us explain the add button. Though it may say add button, it doesn't actually do the inserting of data. What it does, it disables all the unneeded buttons for the adding of new records. So let me just demonstrate it real quick. Once we click the add button, it will disable most of the buttons while only leaving the save, cancel, and clear button. Now I will explain to you those three buttons and how they are connected to the creation operation. So first, let us see the inner workings of the clear button. Clear button, as I stated earlier, only empties out the text fields so that we are able to input a new record. Next, the cancel button. The cancel button simply enables all the buttons that we have disabled earlier. And then we do a query here where we select all the columns from our table, execute it, and then put in the very first record back into the text fields. This will make it so that our Java program is very interactive and alive in a sense. Lastly, we have the save button. The save button is the actual button that does the inserting of data. At first, it will prompt the user that if he or she wants to actually add the data, they may click yes or no. Clicking yes will run the following code. Here we have the SQL code, SQL string containing the MySQL code that will be run in the database. So here we have the command insert into. So insert into our product table. And here are the columns that we must input data in. So over here in the values parentheses, we have a total of 8 question marks. These 8 question marks corresponds to the 8 columns over here. So in order to add record, all we have to do is to run the SQL code using a prepared statement, get the text that's currently written on the text field, and then we just set the string. We set the value into our SQL code. After that, we just empty out the text fields, and then we actually execute the inserting of data. After that, we just initiate the OK cancel method, which basically just prompts the user or alert the user that we have successfully added a new record. Back to the save button. And in the case that the user doesn't actually want to add the record, once they click the no option, it will prompt the user that no records has been added. Lastly, we have the catch method, which catches any SQL related data. For example, empty fields, wrong data type, and many more. So now, you might be wondering, why did I do such a roundabout way of adding record? Why not put it in the add button? Now, I actually put some thinking into this. I did it in such a roundabout way for security purposes. Adding a new record, nothing to scoff at. It is a big deal. We must always make sure that we are adding proper data into our database. And so, we are allowing the user to have many opportunities to double check or back out when adding a record. And now, let us demonstrate the actual operation, the creation operation. So, over here, we have the control panel. Just gonna click add. And then, oh, what if I change my mind? I don't wanna add the record. Then we just click cancel. Boom. But once we want to add the record, we simply click the add button again. And then this is optional. You can either remove the data one by one, or you can just click the clear button to clear all of the text fields. After that, we just put in the put in proper data for our new product. Let's say 1001 is your product ID. Product name is a coral aquarium ornament. The size would be, I would say, small. The price, pretty cheap, let's say 20 pesos each. Purchase date, let's say today, 2022, June 6, June 4, I meant. Expiration date, it doesn't expire, but for the sake of not getting an SQL exception error, let us type in a proper date here. Let's say 2022 06/05. Expiration date 1 day later. Quantity, let's say we have 1,000 of them, and the manufacturer is the Coral company. Oh, wait lang, malapit na ako. And now, once we're done, all we have to do, save, click yes. Boom. Product has been added. Click OK. Then it creates a new instance of this JFrame. Basically opening another tab, the same tab, but updated. So, what if you're trying to add something and then you accidentally click save? Then you have the option of clicking no. Then it will prompt you no records added. And that's the C in the Crud Operations. C meaning creation, inserting, or adding. Next up is the update operation in Crud. U stands for update. Update means modifying an existing record. So let us start. Just double click the update. So here we see the actual code for the button update. Of course, always have it in a try catch method to avoid any errors. And then over here, we just prompts the user if they actually want to update this record. If we don't have this J option over here, we might accidentally just update a data without meaning to. So for security and convenience purposes, we put in a J option confirm dialog box over here. Then we store the value of whatever the user picks in a int result variable. Put it in if else statement. If the result is yes, if the user clicks yes, then we will run the update operation. So standard procedure over here, we have an SQL string here containing the SQL query that we want to do. So over here we have the update command. Update what? Update the product table. Then we just select what datas we want to set or update. So we have the product name, size, price, quantity, purchase date, expiration date, manufacturer. I did not add the product ID as a text field that is updatable. A product ID must always be unique and non-updatable. Of course, we have the where command where we state how we will be able to select the row that we want to update. And for preference, I added an or expiration date is null. This basically just means that the expiration date may be null or no values. So like the standard procedure that we have already explained multiple times. We create a prepared statement, and then we prepare the SQL string that we have. We get the text in from the text fields, put them in the question marks over here. This will complete the SQL code, and then it is time that we execute the SQL query. This will now update our record. Of course, if we have done any updating, sorry about that, if we have done any modifying, it will show us a dialog saying you have successfully updated the record. And then the prepared statement will now close. The new control panel form will appear, disposing the one we used earlier. This will ensure that the Java program is always updated and you don't have to restart manually every time you add, update, delete, or search for records. And of course, we have the else statement in the occasion that they actually say no. So it will just tell the user that no records has been updated. Lastly, the SQL exception catch method catches any SQL related errors that you might encounter. So now let us try and demonstrate the update button. Update operation. Close this, we don't want to duplicate there. So what if, okay, so here's the record that we added earlier. What if we actually want to add the price due to the inflation in our country today? Coral aquarium ornaments now cost 10 pesos higher. Now we just want to update that. Boom. Are you sure you want to update this record? Absolutely yes. Now we have successfully updated the record. A new form appears, and boom, it's been updated from 20 pesos to 30 pesos. Now let's try and make some big changes. Some of our products over here. What if I want to change? What if we made a mistake with the mangrove driftwoods that we have in stock? In actuality, they weren't actually mangroves, they were actually spider driftwoods. And that their sizes were not small, they were actually medium. Since it's a spider wood, it costs more, just a bit more than mangroves, 350. Purchase date, expiration date stays the same. We add in the quantity. We now have 15 quantity as new stocks came in delivered yesterday. Then of course it's from the Driftwoods Tradings Incorporated. Now we just update it. Are you sure you want to update this record? Yes, I want to update this record. Successful. And let's just go and look for it. Boom, spider driftwood. Changed. So earlier I did mention that we are not able to modify the product ID. So what if we actually tried? Let's say we do 2009. What will happen? Try that. Yes. Okay. No prompts whatsoever. Directly went to creating a new form. Go back to it. Boom. Product ID didn't change, just as we made it out to be. That's what we want, that's what we get. And it works like a charm. That's it for the update operations. Now we move on to the delete function. So the delete function simply deletes the record in our database. So like adding records, deleting a record is a pretty big deal. We must ensure that we are deleting it on purpose and not accidentally. So let us go into our code. So here is our code. Button delete. Always put in a try catch method, and since that we are directly deleting data from our database, we always need to prompt our users if they actually mean to delete the record they are currently selecting. Of course, if they say yes, then we will do the following procedure. First, we have the string that will store the SQL code that we will run. Delete from our product table where the product ID question mark. So here we will delete a record from the product table with the product ID that we will determine later. Then we just declare the prepared statement, and then we prepare the SQL string that we made earlier. And now all we have to do is to set string to get the text from the text field, the text being the product ID, set it to the question mark over here, and then we can finally execute the delete operation. So over here in line 724, we need to get the product ID of the data that we're looking at so that we can tell the SQL code over here that we want to delete this specific record that I am currently looking at. Just set it, execute the following code, then it's done. Once it's done, we will restart the query by selecting all the columns in the table and then going back to the very first record by executing the result set statement rs.next. Set the text, tell the user that we have deleted it successfully, and then create a new JFrame window. That's it. Else, if they don't want to actually delete it, the program will just prompt the user that no records has been deleted. Lastly, we have the catch method to catch any SQL exception that we may encounter when running the program. Now, let us try and demonstrate the delete operation. So, we have the code over here. First. So what if you accidentally created a data that you don't actually need? Say 1002, product name, test, size, testing, price 1, let's say 1001, 0101, 1001, 0101, 1 manufacturer, test. Save that. Product has been added. Okay. Oh no! What is this record? A discrepancy. We don't want it in a record. Therefore, we are going to delete it. Delete. Are you sure you want to delete this record? Are you sure that you're not accidentally clicking the delete button? Yes, I am very sure. Now deleted successfully. It resets the text fields into the very first record in our database by calling another selection query. Okay. Boom. A new JFrame program where it's been deleted. That's it for the delete function. And now we have reached the very last operation for this program, which is the search function. The search operation allows us to search for very specific keywords in the product name. For example, I want to search a product with the name Algae on it. We just type it in this text field, and then click the search button, and it will send you the search result form. Let us take a look at the code. So for the search button, the actual operation will not be in the control panel form, but will be in the search result form. So for this, the only purpose of this is that we will be retrieving the text from the text field, the search text field, put it in a variable, string variable, and then we instantiate a new object using the search result JFrame. Then we just open it, close the control panel form, and then store the search that we put in the text field into the get product name method in search result class. So let us just move on to the search result. Over here we have the get product name method, where it requires a string parameter, the product name, or a keyword from a product name. So there, here we go. We just store the value of the argument into another variable. Then, since over here we don't have a continuous database connection, we will be creating one using the myConnection method at the very top of our code. Then we just declare the result set, create an SQL string that contains the code. We just select all the columns from our product table where the prod name is like the keyword that we use to search. So now I'll explain this like command. Like command is different from the equals operator in the code that we've been using earlier. The main difference being that it searches for a specific instance of that specific instance of a keyword, letters, and many more, instead of looking for something very specific. So this command, we might be able to receive multiple records with the same criteria as keyword we used. Of course, we prepare the SQL code, and then using the keyword from the product name, we enclose it in percent form. This means that the keyword may either be in the front or at the back of any product name. We just set that string to the question mark, and then we execute the query. Now execute the code. And of course, we will then set the text of the column values that we receive from the result set, set it to the text fields, and then we're done. Done with the search. Now we just catch any SQL exception error that we might encounter in our code. So now I will demonstrate to you the search operation. So let's start at the very beginning. So now let's click the DB control panel. We'll open the control panel form. Let us search. Let's say I want an algae scraper, but I don't actually know the specific product for it, so I'm gonna type in algae. Then we just search it. It will open the search result form, now containing the data that we search for, the Dimax algae scraper. And of course, we have the following data. In the search result form, we can also do some operations, except for adding new records in this form. We have the update, delete, clear. So we may delete this, we may update it, we may also clear it for some reason, or we can also do another search. Also, if you don't have anything else to do in this form, For example, you want to add a new record, you just click quit, yes, and we come back to the product control panel form. Now you can also search without any text, and it will actually just give you the very last record or an empty text field in the search result. Over here is an extra functionality, basically just a JTable containing the product ID and product name, so that the users may have the convenience of being able to know the product they want to look for. For example, we can use I want to check out the Chihiro's WRGB aquarium, right? So I'm just gonna type in Chihiro's, search it, new JFrame over here, and here we have it. We can do anything we want with it, and yeah, that's it. Go quit, yes. And before we end this, I would like to explain to you the code for the JTable. So for the JTable, at the very beginning, in the class constructor, we actually called the view table method. So the moment the search result form opens, the table will already have data in it. So here in the view table, we just create a connection using the myConnection method. Then we just enter the result set and prepared statement. Of course, we want the SQL code, which is select everything from the table. And then we just prepare the SQL code, we execute it, and then our result set will now contain all of the rows from our table. Now we just select all the information that we need from the result set. So we want the first column, aka the product ID, and the second column, which is the product name. We store it in a variable, and then we put it in a string array called rows. This will store all the product ID and product names for all data. Then we just create the table model named product table. And lastly, we just add all of the data from the rows string array using the add row method. The product table will have all of the data from the database in it. Yes, that's it. And now, welcome to the end of the video. Now, it seems that I've been recording for a while now, and I hope this video doesn't become very long. Well, I doubt it will be very short, that's for sure. So I hope I wasn't able to bore you, Sir Alojado. I hope that my explanations were satisfactory, and the way I presented it is to your liking. And to my classmates who are watching, I hope that you are able to somewhat learn or get an idea or inspiration for making database Java programs in the future. My name is Jennifer Anthony Aventon from BSCS F2021 first year, and I'm signing off. Thank you for watching. I hope to see you more in the future. Goodbye.